What's up guys, welcome back to my channel, and in this video I'm going to be working on my Roblox game for the second time. But if you haven't seen the first one, don't worry, you can watch this one and then the first. I'll try to fill you in, but in this video I am going to be working a lot to make this game a lot better and add a lot to it. Why did I just say a lot 3 times in a sentence? So stay tuned because I'm going to do a bit of everything, some scripting, some modeling, and a tiny bit of GUI. The idea of the game is a simulator where you progress through different weapons and fight stronger NPCs to collect currency. And it's kind of like Pet Sim X, but you're fighting them. So to fill you in if you're new, in the last video I did some basic stuff with the starter spawn place and made a zone and some NPCs that you can kill. And the first map is currently themed and called Noob Meadows. So it's kind of like a grassy area with noob NPCs. I also have a couple tools that do damage to NPCs, but I think that's enough to fill you in. So now I'm going to get on with this video. So to start off, I decided that there was a feature I wanted to add. It was pretty small, so I'll try to keep this section about it minimal. But basically, I spent some time writing a script, and what it does is that when you get an NPC to a certain health or below that health, it runs faster, that it's like damaged and like trying to run away from you faster. And I added this as a sort of way to make it harder to kill the NPCs once you get them low, and as a sort of tiny change because I thought it would be a little more entertaining that way. I will say though that I wanted to make the face change too, although I don't know how to script that yet, so I'm going to wait until I'm more experienced. But let's move on from that small change.
What the?
Next thing I wanted to do was make a purpose to kill the NPCs, like collecting currency, which would be a big part of the game. I decided to call the currency Nubium. Yeah. So I made this little GUI, which can definitely be improved, but this is my first time doing it. And I made this little coin thing. Made it while I was in school, so I wouldn't expect much. This was my first ever attempt at GUI too, so don't expect much from that either. Oh wait, did I mention this was my first time ever doing GUI? In case you guys didn't know, it was my first time ever doing GUI. This was my first. Now let's move on to implementing the gathering of the currency. So I started off with adding a leader stat so I could actually begin to start everything else. So after a lot of tutorials, I was able to implement the getting currency on kill thing, which some weren't working or outdated. Although I did get it to semi-work. It's a little clunky, so I might have to improve it in a future episode, but yeah. I also made it show up on a GUI, which was a lot easier to do. After that, I started to work on a data store that would be able to keep players' progress, but it is a little goofy, so again, I might have to modify that later. Although so far, the data store is clunky, although you can gather currency, which is good. But that's enough of this section, let's go on to the next. So for this change, I was thinking that the first zone looked a little cramped, but also a little bland, which is kind of like contradicting each other. But like to fix this, I decided to enlarge the map and spread things out a little, including the NPCs' pathways. After spreading everything out, I wanted to add a little more detail by maybe adding some flowers and stuff. So I booted up Blender and started modeling. There were 3 types of flowers I wanted to model. First, I wanted to do like a little puffy flower, like maybe a dandelion. And then I did some normal looking flowers. Actually, now that I think about it, does anything I make look normal? So after I spent a little time modeling, I imported them into Studio and started coloring them. I ended up adding some color differences between the same model, so I could use them without looking like it was duplicated. I then scattered them under trees, near rocks, etc. So after a bunch of time scattering them, I figured I should move to something else. So everything else I've made has been fairly minor, but some has been significant, like the currency. Although in this part, I'm going to be adding a whole nother zone to this game. Now, the zone I'm thinking of would be called Lumberjack Forest and have outdoor-related NPCs like lumberjacks. Well, actually, it's said in the name. But like lumberjacks, campers, hunters, and stuff like that. So to start off, I quickly made a model list for what I need to make in Blender. To give you some context, I was kind of trying to make this look like a tall pine tree forest and stuff. But on the list, I had quite a few things, although some I just decided I didn't exactly need, like rocks or a lot of tree variations. I started off with this fallen log thing. I was planning on making 2 variations of it, one empty and one full with wood. I started with the empty one, and after a little bit, I finally got it done. Next, I went to make the one that had an inside. I thought they were coming along pretty nicely, but then disaster struck. I accidentally left to go play video game. The next day, I hopped back in and got to work. I started modeling 2 separate bush models. One would be a cherry bush and one would just be a regular bush. I modeled the cherry bush first so then I could just duplicate it and modify it a little more instead of recreating it from scratch. The bushes didn't take that long, so after they were finished, I started to work on something else. I decided that the forest could use a little lamppost, almost like you're a traveler exploring the forest. First, I started modeling the lamp. I made a little cube inside a frame-like structure. I also added a little hanger thing to attach to the post when I make it. After I finished the actual lamp itself, I moved on to the post. I had actually made the post before the lamp, and it had a couple branches going off it, but I thought that was kind of boring. Next, I moved on to the trees, probably the most important of all these models. So I wanted to do 3 different variations, one short and stubby, one tall, and one kind of random. So I started with the random one and added 2 branches on opposite sides. Then I worked my way up adding leaves. The final product actually looked like a goofy tree monster, but it should hopefully be alright. Next, I made the short and stubby tree, which opposed to the tall one, will only have 3 layers of leaves in contrast to 5. The short and stubby one didn't take long, as I could copy and paste the leaves from the random tree over to this one. I basically repeated this process for the final model, the tall tree. After that, I exported them from Blender, and I had nearly taken a month break from modeling, so it took me a little while to figure out how to import them, like the file type and stuff. But once I did figure that out, I thought I was still doing something wrong, but apparently it didn't show up in Studio because they were too big for just one file, so I put them in separate ones. Next, I colored them, which turned out to look a lot better than I expected from it. And I added a point light to the actual light part of the lamp to make it kind of glow. I was thinking in a later devlog I could make the lighting change from zone to zone, which I think I saw in a video. But that is pretty complicated for right now, so I should just focus on this. So after coloring them to my liking, I decided it would be a good time to use this plugin called Brush Tool to create the map. I started to scatter all the assets around the map, and after some time, boom! I think it turned out great. Although I might want to spread things out a little more once I add NPCs, but for now it's looking pretty good, so I'll move on to the next section. So there is one last teensy thing I want to do before wrapping up this video. I want to remodel the borders that I made. I think they look a little out of place and kind of weird compared to the settings of all the maps, especially the new one. So I'm going to make one for Zone 1 and one for Zone 2. First, I booted up Blender for the 4th time this video and started modeling. So I started off with fairly basic and classic grass border, although I think it looked alright in the end.
I mean, it's alright,
Next, I wanted to make one for the dark forest type thing, so I decided on a mushroom border. Kind of like how in Minecraft there are giant mushrooms in the, I think it's called dark forest biome. Whatever biome has the, darker oak. I thought it would be cool. I thought it would be a cool little twist, so I duplicated the base and modeled mushrooms onto the top. After importing them into Studio, this is how they looked. I thought they looked a little bland, so I added this thing on the outside. It's kind of like a ring for more detail. And I thought it added a lot of depth and made it look a lot nicer too. So I decided it would be a good idea to display some comments, since I haven't done that in a while a time lapse of all the borders play. So I'll start showing those now. Well, there you go. If I didn't pick your comment, sorry. I'll try to include it next time. But I think I'm going to go through a quick recap of what we did. So we added a whole new zone, revamped the borders, we added a couple new weapons, which I didn't talk that much about. We also added a whole currency to the game, and a way to acquire that.
Nice.
Although I also changed the spawn place's borders. I'll probably change the color scheme later too, but yeah, it kind of looks a little weird. If you enjoyed this video, please consider watching my other ones or turning on notifications. And if you stuck around till this part, I really appreciate you. Thanks for watching. Bye.